Welcome to Anews. I'm Elif Saatçıoğlu and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. A United States brokered Armenia-Azerbaijan peace deal is reshaping the South Caucasus as Turkey strengthens ties with Georgia and Trump prepares to meet Putin in Alaska. Today I'll be discussing the latest regional and international developments with my guests, Anews editors, and the other guests are going to be here to reflect on the situations, but we have a news footage and news package to see at first. So let's take a look at that and we'll be back for more.
Türkiye reaffirmed its readiness to continue supporting Syria in various fields under the framework of mutual agreements and shared regional priorities. Emphasizing the importance of cooperation based on mutual respect and national sovereignty, Ankara is committed to maintaining its constructive role during Syria's ongoing transition.
Syria constitutes one pillar of Israel's expansionist policies in the region. The emergence of turmoil and a chaotic environment in Syria have become a priority parameter for Israel's own national security assessments. Our warning to the Israeli government and people is this: your security does not depend on the weakness or chaos of your neighboring countries.
Türkiye also stands firmly against any attempts to legitimize groups affiliated with terrorist organizations, stressing that weapons must remain under the control of the central authority. Türkiye stresses that the agreement between the Syrian government and the Syrian Democratic Forces must not allow formations linked to terrorism to gain political or military influence. Any initiative that threatens Syria's unity or sovereignty is considered unacceptable.
The YPG and its leadership must now abandon their policy of stalling for time. The turmoil they anticipate will not occur, and even if it does, the outcome they desire will never be realized. They must stop putting our Kurdish brothers and sisters at further risk and in holding their future hostage while the road is near.
Türkiye's position remains clear: lasting peace and stability in Syria will be achieved through inclusive governance, national unity, and the elimination of terrorist threats, principles that will guide Ankara's support moving forward.
Our sole goal is for all ethnic groups and beliefs in Syria to continue their lives within the unity and integrity of Syria, posing no threat to anyone, coveting no country's borders, and harboring no terrorist elements on their own soil. We do not seek occupation or domination of the region. However, it is impossible for us to remain silent in an environment where our country's security demands are not met.
Now we have our guest in here and we are going to deep delve into the situation with the relationship with Turkey and Syria. Mehmet Çelik is once again joining us here on Anews. Mehmet, welcome back to Turkey's Diplomacy. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Thank you, Elif.
Well, let's start by the goals of achieving a terror-free Turkey and by the end of the 2025. Let's talk about the stance with Syria and the region in general. So what would you say about the current situation that we are in?
Well, first of all, the terror-free initiative that Turkey launched, actually the first signals came last year in fall in 2024. Now it is unfolding steadily. Now there is a commission has been established at the parliament with the participation of different parties in the parliament. So from the opposition or the government side, as well as the Dem party, which is the affiliated, which is a political, basically political party affiliated with the PKK. They are discussing how this can be communicated with the public and what kind of sensitivities are there in terms of the public interest. The process is continuing at that level right now. As you know, previously there was a symbolic laying down arms by the PKK members in northern Iraq, and now There is a parliamentary commission that is established and will be discussing a political aspect of this process. And of course, this will be linked to the legal steps that will be taken for those members of the PKK who have participated in some violent activities against the Turkish state or Turkish citizens, who have, participated in terrorist activities, or those who have committed directly some crimes using their arms, etc. So there's that aspect too, how they will be, held accountable, and how the justice system will handle them, as well as some members' integration eventually into the society. So that legal aspect and political aspects is now being shaped through the parliamentary commission, and later on, of course, legal bodies will be dealing with that as well. It is something that, of course, is not just confined or not just limited to within Turkey, this PKK issue. Of course, northern Iraq and northern Syria have long been hotbeds for this terror activities that PKK organized to directly pose a threat to Turkey. So the YPG in northern Syria is still an element of the PKK which poses a threat to Turkey. Turkey has called, in line with the territorial integrity of Syria, in line with that political unity of Syria, which the current interim government also is on the same page with Turkey. Turkey has asked for the YPG to lay down arms, and then they had this March 10th agreement with Damascus. But unfortunately, that meeting or that deal is not materializing. There is no substantial outcomes on the field translating into some sort of minimizing their activities or minimizing their demands, or even laying down arms or integrating into the Syrian national army. In that sense, we still see that the YPG is a big threat for Turkey. And this week, Mr. Shabani, foreign minister of interim government in Syria, held a press conference with Mr. Fidan in Ankara. And I think it's important to analyze Mr. Fidan's remarks in a perspective that was directly calling for YPG to speed up the process. But not only that, and he mentions that I think in between lines that all other options are still available if this negotiations, if these talks, if these goodwill at least to end this conflict without another armed conflict, without another operation from Turkey. If that is possible, then Turkey still has this room for a toleration. But I think, in between lines, he was clearly mentioning that time is running out. And if that does not materialize, if YPGs are laying down arms and at least abiding by that March 10th does not materialize, then Turkey still has the option of, with the Syrian government, to launch another offensive into Syria to minimize that threat that is posed by the YPG to Turkey. Of course, the YPG issue, we talked about it, free initiative, and how that should be part. Turkey sees that the YPG should also be part of that process. But at the same time, the YPG's links with the Israel's motivations in Syria, be it through Druze or through the YPG elements, is another thing that needs to be also evaluated and discussed, and how Israel is using YPG to create this atmosphere, to create this momentum in Syria that will further destabilize the country, further fragment the country and divide the country. Basically, this is something that Turkey also says that will not be allowed. Turkey sees, of course, Israel as a destabilizer, as a destabilizing actor in the region, and Syria has been the main theater for that. In addition to what's taking place in Gaza, they try to do that through Druze, and I think Now they are also pushing YPG to carry out some activities. And we saw that in Manbij and Aleppo, some provocations took place there. And how that will unfold is a very big security concern for Turkey as well, because this its instability in Syria directly poses a threat to Turkey as it shares the longest border with the country.
Maybe do tell me about it. Yes, this is a prospect that it is going to probably unfold in the upcoming years. Also, we are going to see how important it is on the field to have a cooperation with the partners that we have. So I do want to learn your opinion about this new national security agreements and the speeches and all back and forth situation. Right now, we finally have a constitution that has to go a long way to build itself up, but we finally have a constitution in Syria rather than a full-blown war and a diversity of the governance. So it is important, isn't it? It is important to make an agreement and make sure that the national security is built upon this new structures that is happening in the Middle East. And what would you say about the steps that are being taken?
Well, first of all, Turkey is understanding the reality on the ground when it comes to Syria at many different levels, be it at the humanitarian level, at the economic level, at political and diplomatic level, as well as the military level. So Turkey knows that Syria needs that reconstruction, rebuilding at all these levels, institutionally, and also when it comes to the basic infrastructure. Militarily, Turkey, following the call and even prior to that from Damascus to help Syria rebuild itself militarily in terms of defense, in terms of security, Turkey is reaching out and extending that assistant or that advisory role right now, and they signed a memorandum of understanding to further strengthen that defense cooperation and security cooperation, and that's what was signed in Ankara this week. As Foreign Minister Shabani and Defense Minister, and also head of intelligence was in Ankara. In addition to, as you know, that this week, on August 8th, last week, Mr. Fidan was in in Damascus. But this is another actually very important meeting that took place, and they signed that agreement between the defense ministers. Now, this will not only help Syria and Turkey to further strengthen their defense cooperation, but also Turkey will help Syria reestablish, reorganize its military. And what does this mean? It is not just given institutional support to train and to train the Syrian military, but at the same time, I think in the next phase, it will mean to push away threats that could be posing both to Syria and Ankara and Turkey in joint operations, be it coming from Israel or be it coming from other terror groups within Syria. And what this means is that Turkey sees any security threats posed to Syria's territorial integrity, Syria's unity, as a threat to itself. And this is why that security cooperation, that military cooperation, is very important, that they have actually signed, and they want to take that cooperation further into new phases. And when that is the case, we can understand, we can analyze that this is not just a simple military cooperation or institutional rebuilding, but it is beyond that, and they want to take it further to jointly tackle the problems that will be posed to Syria's security. This is how Ankara sees it, and I think the fact that Mr. Fidan even mentioned Israel as well as the YPG, and this this security deal or agreement, or at least memorandum of understanding took place, it shows that they see the threats, and they look at the threats, they view the threats from the same perspective, and they want to jointly tackle these threats posed to Syria's security or Syria's stability.
What would you say about Israel's aggressions unfolding as the Foreign Minister Fidan has highlighted that it is important for Syria as well. So Syria is trying to build itself up, and meanwhile there's an aggression that is happening all around the Middle East, and Syria is quite literally affected by it as well, and is going to threatened by the Israel in the long run, as it seems. So what would you say about the Syria's policy towards Israel, and do you think that this cooperation, this union in the Middle East against the aggressor is going to come out as a powerful stance?
Well, I mean, what happens in Syria, Elif, is not just limited to the internal dynamics, as we all know. And the implications, the outcomes affect the region itself. And one of the most vulnerable to that instability in Syria is Turkey, of course. I mean, when the war was taking place during the Assad regime, Turkey suffered from many different perspectives. Security-related issues emerged, humanitarian issues emerged as millions of refugees came to Turkey. That affected Turkey's economy. It affected the social politics, and as well as the internal domestic politics. So at many different levels, Turkey is affected by what happens in Syria. But it's not only Turkey, of course. The region itself is affected by what takes place in Syria, be it Iraq or Lebanon or the whole region. When that is the case, Turkey wants to make sure that stability is not affected. And given the fact that Turkey sees Israel as the destabilizer, that what Israel does in the region. I mean, in Lebanon, in Syria, it's a 12-day war with Iran, and Turkey knows and sees Israel's actions as a threat to itself in a way, because that instability affects Turkey. So Turkey wants to make sure that is minimized. I mean, we're talking about Syria right now, but what happens in Gaza right now is basically, in a way, it's a theater that it should be reflected to the whole region. It's a field that Israel wants to see in the whole region, in Syria, in Lebanon, in parts of other Gulf countries, because they have this greater Israel vision and they want to expand their territory. And all these are taking place step by step. Today they are in Gaza. They are moving that to West Bank. They will move that to, they had clashes with Iran and Lebanon. They have attacked Damascus. They have attacked Syria. And through Druze community, at least a fraction of the Druze community, they want to create that atmosphere of instability in Syria as well. Because when they have that instability, it becomes easier for Israel to use that instability as an excuse to further expand their territory in Syria. And this is something that Turkey sees very clearly and wants to take action before actually that threat or that instability becomes a problem along its borders. So through that perspective, they want to make sure that the YPG threat is minimized. They want to make sure that there is an inclusive government in Syria so that different ethnic and religious communities are not felt sidelined or felt excluded, and that could become a matter of friction between the central government, between the Damascus government and other communities, and that create further clashes within the country. So it's a very complex region, of course, and very complex issue when it is such a diverse, diverse. It's very diverse in terms of religious and ethnic backgrounds, but also in terms of how these ethnic and religious communities become a proxy in the hands of, let's say, in Israel. Previously, we know that ethnic and religious diversity it became an instrument in the hand of, let's say, the Iranian proxies in Syria. So that unity must be established to leave no room for the instigators to trigger new conflicts within Syria as the country is trying to rebuild itself and reestablish itself. And Turkey is saying that I will support you in all different levels, in all needed ways, because your instability in Syria affects me directly. This is how Turkey sees it.
Well, Mehmet, thank you so much for your answers, and thank you so much for sparing your time and joining us here on Anews in Turkey's Diplomacy. Pleasure having you here as always.
Thank you.
And with that, we are going to move on from Syria, and we are going to move to what is happening in Gaza. Heat wave in Gaza is incredible at the moment. They're in famine and people are dying from the malnutrition, as well as the heat wave is taking over the strip, and it is really bad. Let's take a look.
While dealing with a heat wave, people in Gaza struggle to secure enough water for drinking and sanitation, and experts warn that far less than the minimum needed to sustain life is reaching the territory.
الآن احنا بنعيش في جو صعب، صيف، ارتفاع درجات الحرارة كتير، فاستهلاكنا للمية بتكون زي الأيام فصل الشتاء، الفصول الثانية، فالمية كتير عندنا فيها صعوبة، وغير هيك هي أصلاً مش صالحة للشرب، فبنضطر نشربها لأولادنا لأنه فيش قدامنا غير هي، بتسبب لنا أمراض، بتسبب لأولادنا مية ملوثة، أحيانا بنعبي أحيانا بنعبيش، يعني بنعاني كتير من نقصها.
Contaminated supplies spread disease, shortages leave people dehydrated, and fuel restrictions cut power to desalination and sewage treatment plants.
بنشربه بنعاني بنضلنا ننغص مش عارفين ايش مصدرها، بس هي اللي بنلاقيه بوجهنا يعني، لانه احنا بالخيم انت عارف الدنيا، احنا بشهر 8 هذا شهر اب، هذا شهر نار، ومش عارفين نطلع من الخيم نار وبنرجع لها زي النار، بنضطر نشرب المي هاد وين ما نروح.
As the territory faces what experts warn is a worst-case scenario of famine, people are also scrambling to access water for drinking and washing. Sweat-soaked and dust-covered, they cross rubble to fill reused bottles, buckets, or even small plastic bags, hauling them back to Mawasi, the sprawling tent camp where thousands are sheltering. The United Nations estimates that people in Gaza survive on less than 3 liters a day, a fraction of the minimum humanitarian agencies say is needed. Children wheel containers filled with water on carts and jostle around a hose to fill jerry cans and plastic bags with precious supply. They take the water mainly from trucks that receive it from the desalination plants and distribute it among the hundreds of thousands living in tents, but it's not enough for everyone.
And this is happening and unfolding in Gaza, and we are going to deep delve into the situation once again with Dr. Abdanur Toumi joining us from all the way Paris. Friends, Abdanur, thank you so much for joining once again here on Anews. Thank you so much.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on the program.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about the water shortage. We had a package about it, and there's a heat wave, a huge heat wave in Gaza. And the water shortage is a huge problem. It is essential for life. And also we know that famine is taking over. This is like an open air prison thing that is ongoing, and it gets worse every day. So what would you say about the current situation?
Actually, we have been saying this for now nearly 2 years, and the situation is getting worse and worse. And frankly, it's very hard to find the correct adjective to describe what is going on in Gaza Strip and the Palestinian people who have been suffering from this carnage and now these starvation policies. So, and it is, it leaves the analysts and the commentators wordless. Nonetheless, the Palestinians are fighting back and are resistant to an occupation, to these acculturation processes that have been going on for more than 7 decades. And it is clear now that the Palestinian people who have been always fighting and resisting this occupation.
Well, let's focus on the situation that the survival with the water right now. So it is stated that people are surviving on less than 3 liters of water in a day. So how significant is that?
And again, it is very difficult. And I mean, they are not, surviving or fighting to survive, but are also, has become, unfortunately and sadly, the daily life for the Palestinians in Gaza Strip particularly, but so that in West Bank and the occupied Al-Quds Sharif. And this is why the analysts and the observers who have been following these tragedies, we are asking the question, when the international community will react to this and will step up, because the Palestinian people are not fed with nice communiques from here and there and those salon meetings in the UN and talking about the two-state solutions and so on. Even though, the two-state solution is kind of an euphemism, because we saw just lately, actually just a day ago, when the Israeli Prime Minister, he made it clear that, quote unquote, he is on historic and spiritual mission. He is very attached to the vision of a greater Israel, in which include lands of already occupied Palestine and Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and even part of Turkey. So we now this, this person who he doesn't care at all about any about the international communities, international law, international humanitarian laws, and so on. And even though he is under ICC warrant arrest, so. And now the question is, how far he can go? And which just interesting, we are reading, and this guy, he just said, I am ready to go like the Allies did in World War II and going after Gaza City and make it look like Dresden. So this is very, very unheard of and unprecedented statement coming from someone who doesn't care at all about international law and international humanitarian laws, and his government and his army and himself are committing war crimes in Palestine. But the question is also, what are the Arabs? What are the Muslims? And sure, we heard like communiques again from here and there and about showing their outcries and condemnation. And frankly, I don't know what does this now mean, condemnation. I have been hearing this for more than 4 decades. So people are tired, and especially the people in the region are very, very tired. And the Palestinians, actually, they know that they're left alone, and they are fighting and resisting, and they are fighting bravely, and they are fighting with not only with their fingers and nails, but now with their stomach as a result of the imposed famine by the Israeli government on the Palestinians as a result of a collective punishment and ethnic cleansing and forced exile, in which they are war crimes.
Yes, like forced exile, the most unprecedented handmade famine in the world right now that is unfolding, water shortage, heat waves, the fact that they do not have their homes now. What is happening in Palestine is beyond our minds, yet it is still continuing in the good old day of 2025. When we consider it like that, we think the importance of journalism, don't we? And we think the importance of coverage, but Israel is actually trying to limit that as soon as possible, which makes me and other peers of mine think that there's probably even more than what is going on that we see, more than what we see, because we are not able to show the world and see for ourselves that what is happening in Gaza. Under these circumstances, what do you say about Israel's treatment to journalists? Because they're killing journalists as soon. Al Jazeera's journalist has just died a couple days ago, and we know that they're treating the news footages to be disappeared, so much like what was happening in the World War II Germany. So what would you say about all of these in that perspective?
Actually, your statement is there, and you made it, and you get to the point. Actually, all this, it will be summed up in one word: impunity. And I would add, actually, two more words, or three words. It's this state of denials. I mean, coming from the Israelis who have been having this coverage and protection from the Americans, who gave them not only a green light, but just, I mean, the key with the full tanks of a bulldozer and to drive through on the Palestinians. Now, as far as the journalist question goes, is in fact, I mean, now the Israelis, I mean, government and actually elite and this far-right Talmudic racist government, I mean, is in a panic mode because of the truth that is coming from Gaza. And this is what those brave journalists who have been doing a great job and showing to the world through their courage and also their cameras what is going on really in Gaza, because the Israelis don't want the world to see what is going on. And this was kind of a deliberated execution for the Palestinians, the journalist Palestinians who are in Gaza. And sadly, I mean, I myself, as a journalist, I mean, again, we can't say we feel useless toward their courage and their excellent job that has been doing for nearly now 2 years. And as we all know, I mean, journalism is not a crime. But now let's not forget, when we speak about those young journalists, brave journalists who are challenging the narrative of the Israelis, and actually to some point they did demystify this narrative, who has again who has an echo in the West and Western media and among the elite and politicians, whether here in Europe or even in the US. So the deliberated assassination of the Al Jazeera crew journalist 2 days or 3 days ago, it's not, I mean, the first one. I mean, let's not forget, actually, it did happen with another Palestinian who is Al Jazeera journalist who were killed by the American army in Iraq in 2004 because he dared to show up on a hotel roof and report about the atrocities that they were committed by the American army. And in 2022 was another icon of Palestinian voice in occupied Palestine of Shireen Abu Akleh, who was deliberately killed, assassinated by an Israeli soldier. And that actually to make this parallel, actually this senseless argument that Al Jazeera journalists who were killed 2 days ago were quote-unquote affiliated with Hamas, knowing that Shireen Abu Akleh was an American Christian Palestinian and Hamas doesn't control the West Bank. So all this, again, the Israelis now, after starving the Palestinians and asking for the resistance to disarm, now they are hiding or pushing to hide the cameras that are showing the atrocities that are committed by their army on the Palestinians.
Well, lastly, I would like to focus on, yes, the journalists are an important issue, even especially for people like you and I who is into this situation. But let's focus on the humanitarian aid perspective of the situation as well, because we have been talking about the heat waves and the famine and water shortage. So there is an aid going to Gaza. It's very limited, but we are trying to make sure that it is being sent. So what would you say about the role of the humanitarian aid in keeping people alive under this current blockade?
I mean, again, the Gazaan people, they are not asking for food. They are not asking for a spoon of broth or tomato soup. They are not asking for a spoon of rice. I mean, they are fighting for their dignity. And this is what we call it now, humanitarian aid. It doesn't make any sense. Sure, they need this aid. It is imperative. I mean, the Israelis authorities, I mean, they should open those blocked corridors and let credible and professional and experienced international NGOs who have solid and experience and are competent, and they know how to deal with situations like this. But unfortunately, the Israeli authorities, they don't want to allow that because it is a part of their strategic objective is to starve the Palestinians and push them for exile. So, and going and demonizing the UN and the international, credible international NGOs by replacing them, particularly the UNRWA, replacing them by this so-called humanitarian or Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, that now it has become clear that it is under the authorities of the Israeli army, and the Israelis, they want to replace it by the UNRWA. It is clear. So this is why the international community has to step up and stop, particularly this hypocrite government, whether in the West and some Arabs, unfortunately, who have, like, dropping this aid, and as if the Palestinians were, again, are incapable to manage and to be able to give these needs to the beneficiaries with dignity. Again, the main objective of this is strategic objectives of Israelis to push the Palestinians for good and continue in their ethnic cleansing and oblige exile, and also to humiliate the Palestinians, because in the end of the day, this government, this Talmudic racist government, doesn't recognize, doesn't see the Palestinians as a human being.
Well, that is the situation, and that's quite well summarized. Thank you so much for joining us here on Anews on Turkey's diplomacy. Dr. Abdul Tumi was with us. Thank you. And with that now, we are going to conclude our program of today. Stay tuned for more in Anews.